Imagine being 17 years old and one day, soldiers from a foreign empire march into your city, tear you away from your family, and take you 1,000 miles from home. You're told to forget your name, forget your language, forget everything you knew, and start over, serving the very king who destroyed your world. That's not the opening of a movie. That's how the story of Daniel begins. It's the 6th century BC. The city of Jerusalem has just fallen to the Babylonian Empire, one of the most powerful civilizations on earth. King Nebuchadnezzar doesn't just want land and treasure. He wants Jerusalem's brightest young minds, so he can reshape them into loyal servants of Babylon. Daniel is one of those young men. Along with 3 friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, he's taken to the royal palace, given a new Babylonian name, and enrolled in an intense 3-year program designed to strip away everything Jewish about him and replace it with Babylonian culture, language, and religion. They even assign him rich food and wine straight from the king's own table. Sounds like a privilege. But for Daniel it's a problem because that food had likely been offered to Babylonian gods first, and eating it would mean compromising the very first thing he'd been asked to give up, who he really was. So Daniel does something quietly bold. He simply asks his supervisor for a compromise. Let me and my friends eat vegetables and drink only water for 10 days, and then compare us to everyone else. The official is nervous. If these young men show up pale and weak, he could lose his head. But he agrees to the test. 10 days later, Daniel and his friends don't just look healthy, they look stronger and sharper than everyone else in the program. It's a small moment, easy to skip past, but it sets the tone for everything that follows. Daniel isn't going to abandon who he is. He's just going to find wise, respectful ways to hold on to it, even inside a system that wasn't built for him. Fast forward a few years. Daniel and his friends have finished their training, and they've genuinely impressed the king with their intelligence. But then something happens that will define the rest of Daniel's life. King Nebuchadnezzar has a nightmare so disturbing it shakes him awake, but by morning, he can't remember what it was, just the feeling of it. So he does something almost absurd. He calls in every wise man, magician, and astrologer in Babylon and demands that they tell him what he dreamed, without him giving them a single clue. If they can't, he says, he'll have them all executed. Naturally, nobody can do it. And Nebuchadnezzar, in a fury, orders every wise man in the kingdom killed, which now includes Daniel and his 3 friends, even though they were never even brought in to try. Here's where Daniel shows us who he really is. He doesn't panic. He asks the king for a little time. Then he goes to his 3 friends and together they pray. That night, the mystery is revealed to Daniel. The next morning he stands before the most powerful man in the world and says something remarkable. I can't take credit for this. There's a God in heaven who reveals secrets, and he's shown me your dream. Then Daniel describes it perfectly. An enormous statue with a head of gold, a chest of silver, a torso of bronze, legs of iron, and feet made of a strange mixture of iron and clay. And then a stone, cut from a mountain by no human hand, comes crashing down and smashes the whole statue to pieces. Daniel explains that each part of the statue represents a kingdom that will rise and eventually fall, including Babylon itself, and that one day, God will establish a kingdom that never ends. The king is stunned. He falls to his knees in front of Daniel and admits that Daniel's God is greater than any god he's ever known. And just like that, this exiled teenager is promoted to one of the most powerful positions in the entire empire. Nebuchadnezzar builds an enormous gold statue and orders that the moment the royal music plays, everyone in the kingdom must bow down and worship it. Anyone who refuses will be thrown into a blazing furnace. Almost everyone bows. But Daniel's 3 friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, as they're now known, refuse. They won't worship anything but their God, no matter the cost. They're reported immediately, dragged before the king, and given one last chance. Their answer is one of the boldest lines in the whole Bible. Even if our God doesn't save us from this fire, we still won't bow down to your statue. Furious, Nebuchadnezzar orders the furnace heated 7 times hotter than normal, so hot it kills the soldiers who throw the men in. But when the king looks inside the flames, he doesn't see 3 men burning. He sees 4 figures walking around completely unharmed. He calls them out, and when they step from the fire, there's no burn on their skin, no smell of smoke on their clothes, nothing. Nebuchadnezzar, stunned all over again, declares that no one is allowed to speak against their God. Years pass. Kings come and go. Eventually the mighty Babylonian Empire itself falls, and a new ruler comes to power, a Persian king named Darius. And by now Daniel is an old man. But instead of fading into the background, he's trusted more than ever. In fact, Darius is planning to place Daniel above everyone else in the kingdom, second only to himself. And that's exactly the problem. The other officials are consumed with jealousy. They try to dig up dirt on Daniel, any scandal, any mistake, any excuse to bring him down. But they find nothing. Daniel is, in every sense, clean, trustworthy, consistent. So they come up with a different plan. Not to attack what Daniel has done wrong, but to weaponize what he does right. They go to King Darius with a flattering proposal. Let's pass a law that for 30 days, no one is allowed to pray to any god or person except you, your majesty. Anyone who breaks it gets thrown into a den of lions. Darius, flattered, agrees and signs it into law. A law that, under Persian tradition, can't even be changed by the king himself once it's official. The trap is set. And they know exactly how Daniel will respond. Daniel goes home. He climbs to the upstairs room of his house, opens the window that faces toward his distant homeland, and kneels down to pray, exactly like he has done 3 times a day, for as long as anyone can remember. He doesn't hide. He doesn't change his habits because the law changed. He simply keeps doing what he's always done. And the men waiting outside his window hear every word. They rush to the king, thrilled to report that Daniel has broken the law. And here's the gut punch. Darius immediately realizes he's been manipulated. He spends the rest of the day desperately trying to find a loophole to save Daniel. But there isn't one. The law is the law. And with a heavy heart, he gives the order. As Daniel is lowered into the den of hungry lions, the king says something almost like a prayer of his own. May your God, whom you serve so faithfully, rescue you. A massive stone is rolled over the opening. The king seals it himself so that nothing can be tampered with. That night Darius can't eat, can't sleep. He paces his palace alone, worrying about a man he never wanted to condemn. At the very first light of dawn the king runs, not walks, runs back to the den. Breathless, he presses his hands against the stone and calls out, almost afraid of the answer. Daniel, has your God been able to save you? And from the darkness below a calm, steady voice answers back. My God sent his angel and shut the mouths of the lions. I was found innocent before him, and innocent before you too, your majesty. The relief on the king's face says everything. He orders the stone rolled away immediately, and Daniel is lifted out, completely unharmed. Not a single scratch. Darius, overwhelmed, sends out a new decree to his entire kingdom. Everyone everywhere should honor and respect the God of Daniel, a living God whose kingdom will never end. So what do we actually take from a story like this? I think it's this. Daniel never controlled the empire he lived in. He didn't choose to be taken from his home. He didn't choose the kings he served or the laws passed around him, or the jealousy of the people who wanted to see him fail. Almost nothing about his circumstances was in his hands. But his character was. His habits were. The choice to keep a window open and keep praying even when it was dangerous, that was his. And maybe that's the real lesson underneath all the miracles and dramatic rescues. It's not really a story about lions at all. It's a story about staying who you are, quietly and consistently, especially in the moments when it would be so much easier not to. Daniel didn't survive the den because he was fearless. He survived it because long before that night, he had already decided who he was going to be. And maybe that's still the question worth asking today. Not what would you do if you were thrown to the lions, but who are you quietly on an ordinary afternoon, when no one's watching at all?